Question: how much more money would your business make if you were able to talk more concisely, clearly, and effectively about how you help your ideal customer profile? On today's podcast, I had copywriting specialist, presentation specialist, Jon Billett on the show, the founder of StoryQuadrant. They've worked with massive conglomerates across the globe, helping them refine their stories, presentations, so they actually walk into boardrooms and people leave with memories and know exactly what you do, and your brand basically becomes unforgettable. Tune into this podcast. This was an absolute masterclass. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm JT Story, and the Grappling Growth Podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Jon, welcome onto the podcast.
Thank you very much, Joe. Great to be here.
Jon, I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
What does growth look like to me? Growth. I think growth for me personally has been busy all the time. I think actually growth to me, Joe, is really expanding my customer base. I've got a lot of customers and a lot of repeat customers, but growth really for me comes from acquiring new customers and spending time working those relationships so that I sign up more customers through each year that I run the business.
And has that always been the focal point within the business, or was it more so at the start focused on retention and delivering exceptional results for your current clients?
The first focus was making sure the product was fit for purpose. That was the early years, really building the product and then testing the product with customers. And the sign of the product being great was getting repeat business. And I think that was definitely a shift. For example, one of the early customers that we had, we did some writing for them. And I say, it's a big deal when a customer signs up and says, we want you to do some writing for us. And they've not seen, you haven't got any sort of evidence at this point. But we're now, I think, writing around about our 30th story for that customer. So, in the early days, it was about getting those proof points and actually creating a product that added value and created a lot of value for our customers, and then getting the repeat bookings and the evidence, and then get to a point where I want to acquire, get more customers on board, basically. So it has been a shift, definitely been
a shift. What was your initial playbook to get customers in the beginning?
The initial playbook. Somebody said to me back in the day when I started this, the initial play was it was all going to come from relationships, my existing relationships, people that knew me and knew the quality of my work, and to leverage that because my personal brand at that point was going to be really the thing that sold and not the product. But I've actually worked really hard over the last couple of years. I was very, very conscious. One of the goals of the company was I didn't really want to be the brand of the company. I wanted the company to be its own brand. And we've had, so that there's obviously growth associated with that. And then people are buying the product, they're not buying me. And then this was something which I've been consciously working towards over certainly the last few years. And it's only recently paid off. I've actually, a few people have spoken about the brand and not associated it with me at all. And that was a really satisfying moment, right? It paid off eventually. It took a long time, but it paid off.
I think there's a big dissociation between small businesses, and when you think of a small business, you think of it as, oh, Jon's great at what he does, as opposed to you talk about the actual entity itself. Just for the sake of the listeners, could you just give a 10-15 second just elevator pitch of what you do, who you help, and just so they kind of can connect the dots, and a little bit about your background, because you mentioned you'd probably leverage your network and your experience there, so it'd be good for people to understand what you were doing there.
Yeah, so my background is has been in tech sales for specifically as a solutions architect and enablement person. I did that for about 20 years combined. And so I've been always involved in deals and helping enable sellers and creating content for sellers to have better interactions with their customers. But what do I do now? We actually have you noticed that it's becoming harder to engage people in presentations in general, right? It's becoming harder and harder to actually get people's attention and to stick, because there are notifications everywhere, right? And the result is, if people are being distracted far easier now than they ever have been before, then they're actually listening to you less. Right? So you spend some time with them, they take away less. But what if I could help your presentations become over 1,000% more memorable? The figure is actually 1,160%, but that sounds ridiculous, so I round it down. That's what I help people with. It's all about understanding how the story that you're telling, the presentation that you're creating, the experience that you're creating with your audience needs to be very carefully orchestrated now, down to the words that you use and the visuals that you use to support those. And it's all about creating more memories in an audience, because after you've left the room, that's when the real selling begins, right? It's whether your story is easy to retell after you've left. So that's what I do. I help sellers polish their messages and know how to create an end-to-end flow that ticks all of the boxes and keeps people, even down to we try to constantly engineer information gaps. So people kind of need to listen to the next part just to figure out, okay, this is the teaser, we want to get there. And it's constantly really plate spinning with attention to make sure that we hold it as much as we can. That's what I do. I help people with that.
So when let's say we were to work together and you were to say, okay, this is what I need, how would you start working with a new client? Would it be a case of sitting down, understanding what their core product is, what the problem they solve, the solution they offer, case studies, experience? Would you compile all of this information, consult me, strategize, and then you start working your magic like that?
Yes, so there's two real main ways of engaging with us. One is we can enable you with the tool set and the structure and the methodology, or we can actually work with you to create those materials. So actually, the project I'm currently working on, we kicked it off last week, and the first part of this is all I'm doing is in a room with people from sales and enablement across the business, and is going through it's a discovery session, really understanding what trends that their customers are seeing, what pain those trends cause, then understanding what the technology does, how you articulate its value, what evidence have you got, what does the future state look like for a company who uses this technology, where does it fit in the category, who are the competition, how do we differentiate? So we do a lot of discovery, really down to questioning as much as we can before the next phase, which is then we're going to restructure this into a narrative, and that narrative then gets replayed back to various people and teams within the organization until we settle on that narrative, and then we build the asset afterwards, whether it's a presentation or it might just be a conversation pitch. This is also, the structure lends itself to create presentations or conversations. So provided you've got a structured conversation, it can still take you through the same stages. So it's really the two main ways are either we arm you, here's the tool set, or we can do some consulting and drill down into what you're really trying to sell and bring it back to its core element, a message and positioning, and then create the assets for the organization.
So essentially, one is a done by you, done with you package, and then one is done for you, and then the primary would be for the smaller business. Maybe they don't have the investment there to then go full in, and then essentially
exactly.
give them that toolkit and then work there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a 2-day engagement versus maybe a 2-week or 3-month engagement. Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. That makes sense. And typically for you, who have you had most joy? And maybe there's a few different industries and businesses that you've worked with. But who have you had most joy bringing something to life? What's a project that can stand out to your mind and say, really had fun doing that, or made a real impact to the wider audience or society?
Yeah, audience or society. Okay, there's a lot to unpack in that one there. I can genuinely say I thoroughly enjoy all of the engagements. There's as much fun as we can possibly have when we do any consulting or training. I think the real joy comes from the moment after we finished, where either you get, it's very, I mean, it's lovely to hear when your session is labeled as inspiring. Yeah, that feels, I feel like I've done a really good job at that point. But also when you hand off material and see somebody else use it, and the stories that you get back. So there was somebody I was working with in New Zealand many years ago, and I share this story a lot because it kind of proves the power of when you understand the narrative and what your purpose is. So the person I was working with had a broken microwave, and she wanted to get rid of this microwave, so she listed it for sale on a free ad site in a town in New Zealand. But she wrote a story based on the structure, a funny story about this microwave, and the microwave was possessed. It would do random things, and basically it was useless. But if you wanted to possess the microwave, this is the one. So she listed it for sale for $1. And the story was funny, it was engaging, and it got people commenting on the story. So the more comments it got, the more visibility it got, and the price of this microwave started increasing. And then a national radio station and another broadcaster picked it up and broadcast the story of this possessed microwave to an even bigger audience. And the microwave ended up selling for $64, not $1. But then Panasonic also then found out about the possessed microwave, which they'd obviously released into the community and was causing a lot of distress for somebody because they created this microwave. They clearly felt bad about it, and they made a significant donation to a charity, all because she decided, I'm going to write a story about the microwave. So it's those moments where people realize actually it's not just about using this skill set to sell something. I can actually use this skill set to create stories for my children at bedtime. I can use this to engage with people, and actually that person also used a story to convince an organization to work with a charity, and that was also a successful outcome. So I love hearing that people have used the framework elsewhere, when I'm not involved at all, but they're running with it and getting some great results from it. So that's for me is the moment I live for those moments.
When you started with a microwave, I thought, where on earth is he going with this? How is he going to flip this into a story of making impact to an audience or wider society? And you did just that. So absolute credit.
Is a favorite. The microwave story is a favorite one. Yeah,
It is a strong one. I'm curious, the framework you've alluded to, what does it look like?
What it looks like is basically 4 different story types, and I'm going to probably dig into a bit of a hole here for a moment. Now, I started asking people maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I started asking people, do you want to tell more stories? And they would say yes. I also realized that a lot of senior management would ask people or encourage people to tell more stories, but that was kind of where the enablement ended, and that support ended with, you've got to tell more stories. We know we've got to tell more stories, right? Okay, so my next question is, if you know you want to tell more stories, what types of stories do you want to tell? There's a delay with the answer to that question. Okay, and the majority of people would say success stories. Right, that's a good place to begin. Success story, what does it do? It provides evidence of the value that you've created in the past in another organization. It's a story arc, is a transformational story, but it's not the very first story that you would ever tell. This is what I was trying to explain. You would never just walk into an organization, try and sell them something by the first thing that you say when you open your mouth is, let me tell you how I helped somebody else. That's not how it goes. So the important thing with a success story is it needs to be relatable and relevant. How do you make it relatable and relevant? Well, you've got to kind of do some research. You've got to do a bit of discovery. Now, if we think about discovery a also be a story. Okay, so let's step back through this. So what do I mean with discovery as a story? Well, imagine you're writing a success story for a prospect as if they were a customer in the past that you have helped them. So what were they trying to do? Because they've tried things before they even knocked on your door and asked you to help them. They tried lots of other things before that. So what did they try? Why did they fail? What was the moment they decided they needed to go externally? And what happens if they buy your technology? And what does their future state look like? So using a story framework to understand where they have got to today and where they could go in the future. And as soon as you know that, then you can wheel the most appropriate success story in. Oh, you remind me of this other company that's a very similar set of challenges. So that's where those two are linked. But you would never walk up to somebody in the street and start peppering them with questions, asking them about, lots of other stuff, because what is this? You kind of got to give some kind of background to this first. So if you want somebody to open up and start sharing insights about their person, their sales, their company, what do you need to do before that? Well, there's your story. So your story comes before they open a lid and tell you their story. Okay, so what does your story look like? Well, your story is broken down into two main areas. One is the positioning story, which not many people, when I ask people what types of stories you want to tell, most people say success stories. They don't say positioning stories. Actually, positioning stories are probably as useful and beneficial as success stories. Okay, so how do you write a positioning story? So that's a different structure. It doesn't use an arc-based structure. It uses a linear structure, and it can run across multiple campaigns. It can run across multiple meetings, multiple events, but there's a core theme that ties all of this together. It's very different than a self-contained success story. Then
Can you define
you've
a
got the
positioning story?
Say again?
Can you just define a positioning story?
Yeah, so a positioning story is purely articulating what you do as an organization, but in a way that you put your story into their world. If you were to ask me what I do, and I say, well, actually, I create storytelling enablement for sellers. That's very different than if I then push the story into your world and say, have you noticed it's actually becoming harder to control the attention of an audience? So before I even tell you, and I know this is one of the biggest observations with first call decks in presentations. First call deck typically puts you as a company in the story, but it doesn't put the customer in the story. It's a very, very different approach. If you put the customer in the story, then the first thing will be, let's identify the trends that are affecting you and impacting you from an external perspective that you don't have any control over, but you've got to deal with it. Okay, so what trends are you facing? What pains caused by those trends? And then I can now allude to how I can help you by inserting a hook into that narrative. And it's very linear. It's very linear. It will have a theme that runs through all of this, that ties all of the stages together. And trend, pain, hook, contrast. What's life like today? What could life be like in the future? Differentiation, evidence, value, and future state. This is all very linear, and it can be conversation based, as opposed to a look back and say, this is how we helped a company transform into this new world. Is convincing somebody to listen to you. So if you think about the positioning story, you've got the trend, pain, and the hook. Those three things are set up to make people, to frame the conversation in a way that people want to know, okay, you've identified this as a gap. This is an issue in my world. You say you can fix it. And I've alluded to how I might be able to fix it. And that's when we go into the second half of the story, which then explains how we can fix it. So that's a different type of structure for different stages, and you need to think about it in a very different way. Then you've got your story. So the moment somebody lays their eyes on you, there's going to be lots of things that happen. They judge trustworthiness within about a tenth of a second of meeting you. So in a tenth of a second, which is far shorter than you could say, I'd like to introduce myself. They've made some decisions based on previous biases, stereotypes, and even past personal experiences. Do you remind me of another Joe that I know in the past? If you do, how do I feel about that Joe? Am I going to feel the same about you because maybe you look similar, or your name is the same? But we kind of make all of these assumptions, and you've only got a very, very short period of time before those almost get too solidified, because there are not enough data being provided by the person you're meeting to really understand what they're really like. And that happens really, really quickly. And interestingly enough, if you have a bad first experience with somebody, further exposure to that person doesn't quickly change how you felt about them from that very first interaction. So I'm like, if you meet somebody for the very first time and the first thing you do is just talk about yourself and not put the story into their world, how are they going to think, oh, you're just like another vendor, you're another one of those people, same type of person, just here's the logo slide, okay, I'm expecting all of this, you're not even listening to me, you're not a good listener, I may as well just check out now and not engage with that person. So those first 4 minutes are really important. You got to make a good first impression. You're going to be categorized in one of 3 or 4 different ways. One is, is this person a threat? Is this person indifferent? After this event, am I ever going to remember them again? Or is this a person I can trust and potentially put into a friend category? Those are the 3 or main categories that are going to happen really quickly. And for example, if you use a classic first call deck, unintentionally, most of those decks create something called psychological reactance, and it removes choice from your audience. It feels like they're on this structured flow, that you're delivering this monologue. And we know that monologues are one of the easiest ways to ensure that you reduce your win rates. By having conversations with people and having the right amount of questions in those discovery sessions can actually increase your win rates, because you're involving them in that as a conversation and not just a monologue delivery. Most people would rather have a kind of interactive conversational approach, even if it's a whiteboard, or even if it's a positioning story that puts them in the world, rather than you pitch a monologue of 45 minutes to them, basically leaning into office locations and revenue and how many people you got working for you. None of this is really interesting to the company. Even if you work at a company, it's not that interesting, let alone the first thing you tell when you meet a prospect is, let me tell you what my offices are. I was like, what's that about? It's like, just think about everything. Even the agenda slide is like, surely you should agree the agenda before you even meet with somebody, rather than put the agenda up as you in the very first few moments of meeting somebody. Surely it would be better to agree that beforehand by email, and then just say, okay, this is what we're going to cover today, and just get it done, bang out of the way, and use those first few minutes to your advantage, and really try to get somebody to create a much stronger connection with you, and not just bore the pants off them within the first few seconds.
Unpacked so much there that I've personally experienced in my own sales calls, analyzing other sales calls, and this was one of the real reasons why I wanted to have you on today, because I thought you would have brought a lot of substance here to the audience, and I know that I'm getting value from it. So I know that 90% of the people who will listen in will derive value as well. So thank you so much.
That's all right. I actually didn't get to the end. I probably should just round this out, otherwise I'm going to be worried. The 4th story that we help people with is the story that people tell after you've left. And that comes down to the structure of your presentation, making sure that I see so many presentations and so many decks where afterwards I'm actually not able to retell what that is because I didn't understand it. So it's setting people, because you only get about 5% of the time face-to-face now with a buyer. So you want to make sure that your story is clear enough that when you have left, they can retell your story after the fact. Because I always say, like, this is a conversation, Joe, that we're having right now. It's not a story until you tell somebody else about it. And then what are you going to say? So this is a retrospective narrative construction. It's like, I experienced this. Now I'm going to tell somebody about it afterwards. Am I going to tell them and articulate the value? Or is it just going to be very vague and say, you know what, it was all right, you should have been there? It's very different. So sorry, I just needed to round that out.
No, that's so well said. Interestingly, I had a very good sales call yesterday, and it isn't glossed up as, oh, we're just learning about your business. It was a direct sales call. A guy who I've been speaking to now for about 4 months, give or take. So it's consistent nurturing. We caught up for the first time in about 2.5 months. And generally, he always pushes me off to his executive assistant, takes a while to get a meeting booked. We booked this one about 25 days out, so 3-4 weeks away. And it's a very, very slow lead time. and very similar to what you were talking about. Are you familiar with Donald Miller's work, brand
With who?
storytelling? Donald Miller.
No.
So I had this in the background here, just so he's got a very strong book. I read it maybe about 2-3 months ago, called Building a Story Brand, and he's got his story brand framework. So it's divided into 7 sections. And this is essentially how you go through your presentation to make it similar to what you were saying, identical to what you were saying actually, making it about the person you're talking to, their business, and not something generic. So what he does is he starts with a character. So who are you? Where are you? What's your problem? So that's step 2, and understanding what to do. And then he positions you as in the seller as the guide. So this is the person. You're not there to make your business the hero. You're there to make them the hero, and you're essentially the guide there. And then it goes over to who gives them a plan. So essentially you're there and you're saying, this is where we can get to if we do X, Y, Z. And what's really cool with AI, ChatGPT right now is you can essentially get a transcript from a sales call, say, how could I adopt Donald Miller's story brand framework here, and then essentially work all of these puzzles out. So that could just give you some anchoring points if you're not too sure where to start. Number 5 is then calls them to action. So essentially gives them the steps of saying, hey, this is what we can look at doing. And then it either results in 6 or 7. So success, they actually achieve the outcome, or 7, they don't achieve the outcome. And then essentially you can recycle them back to where they're at. But what you've been telling me is really what I've tried to adopt with my presentations and delivery. And I'm just trying to find the sweet spot between having a singular productized deck that I can go over and over again, but also making that personalized. And where I think I've been at a crossroads is, how do I keep something that's productized? Because if prospects find something is productized, they have trust that it's a system, it's been repeatable, it's been done before, as opposed to, whoa, you've done this all bespoke for me. Because this is bespoke, because this is specialized for me, how do I know it's going to work? And that's the fine balance that I've tried to get in between. Would you say that maybe using relatable case studies is the arc that bridges that gap, or is there something else?
Yeah, that's certainly the value and the evidence. And actually, a lot of case studies are not stories as well. That kind of irks me. They are a list of facts that have happened to an organization. But case studies are important, or a success story is probably more important, because you can remember. It's easier to remember a story than it is a case study. But if you think about this, actually, it's useful in the early stages of the sales cycle, all the way through to right to the end, to allow people to have the evidence, even to let you made the decision. You can have confidence because to remind you that other people have done this. That's absolutely they are. There was another part I was going to answer then. It escapes, but yes, it escapes. But that absolutely, So we do under the personalization. So this is So I think having from mine's a service delivery as opposed to a product. The framework is really important, right? And it's not. This is what I'm selling, is the framework that will help you repeat and scale this across the team. So it's not something which is it's not an idea. It is a repeatable. How I always think about this is I'm trying to create storytelling as an industrial skill and not soft skill. It's not all about emotions. We're going to bring that into it, but it's a framework that you buy into that you can then use. That's the first thing. Second thing is personalization. We know. There's so much analysis now of call recordings and finding just sweet spot of how many questions to answer versus what. But actually, we know personalization has a huge impact on success, especially if you personalize and follow up within a very short period of time after a call. So personalization is absolutely important. So how do I personalize? So the 2 ways that I try to personalize is that I keep my visuals incredibly simple, because it allows me to tailor the narrative to that conversation, and I'm not being driven too much by a slide that it looks like I'm talking about this. So I actually have an artist that draws me a series of pictures, I describe the picture that I want, and he will then draw that picture, but that picture will have multiple purposes. I can use it in different places based on the type of message that I want to actually deliver. Second thing, personalization. One of the most underutilized tools that allow you to personalize more than anything else is the whiteboard. It's in most meeting rooms, especially if you're face-to-face with prospects. Is one of the easiest ways to personalize a story to that person right then in that room, and they would even
Why do you
collaborate.
think it's so important?
What I think whiteboarding is so important. Okay, all right, I may get onto my soapbox here for a couple of moments. So the reason it stemmed from I created whiteboarding workshops about 10 years ago. And one scenario that I had was I was in a meeting in November one year with a UK management team of a large electronics company, and I designed a whiteboard pitch. So it wasn't a first call deck. It was this is the concept. This is what you're buying into. And as you know, deals they tail off, they go a bit cold, then they come back to life. And I didn't see that team again until I bumped into them all at an event in London in the following May. So 6 months had passed, and the guy, it was the UK managing director, started talking about the whiteboard pitch that I'd drawn 6 months earlier. I'm like, I can't remember what I had for breakfast some days, but this guy could remember. Anyway, so I ended up meeting them the following week in their office in London. But what I had done for that follow-up visit, I created 3 bespoke whiteboards to illustrate in these 3 different use cases how the technology would help them. And when I arrived at their offices, the first thing they did was they handed me a brand new set of whiteboard markers and said, we ordered these just for you for today, and we've booked a meeting room that's got the biggest whiteboard in it. And I thought, okay. And it was a great day. It was a really good day of whiteboarding. And, it wasn't just ad hoc. It was pre-planned and designed, and it had a purpose. So I started to do more of this. And I actually realized that as soon as you got, one of these pens in your hand, a lot happens. The list is actually much longer than you consider. So the first thing is, Joe, are you a good drawer?
Average.
Right. Okay. So most people will be average, or they say no, which is a good place to begin, because if most people think they're not very good and I start drawing something that doesn't look very good, then we've got something in common, right? And if it looks really good, nobody else is going to pick up a pen and draw on it with me, but because it may look too good. If it looks too good, then you might think this guy's got a skill that I don't have, and we actually push a wedge between. Right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is we actually like tracking objects. We like moving objects, right? This moves. You don't need to talk, but this moves. So people, it builds anticipation. People are trying to figure out what you're drawing. I did one whiteboard, and somebody said, "Why are you drawing a treehouse?" And everybody else laughed. I wasn't drawing a treehouse. I was actually drawing Elizabeth Tower in London. But I realised that I wasn't talking. They were trying to figure out what I was drawing because I had this pen. Somebody made a joke. Everybody else laughed. Endorphin released. Relaxed on my side. Okay, this is good. So I realized, okay, then I can personalize this. So I can now personalize this. I can put things into this diagram, into this story that I'm creating that are now relevant and relatable to these people based on how they talk to me. So I can adjust it. Okay, this is good. Then you end up with a picture. Now, we've got something called the picture superiority effect. We process pictures about 50, 60,000 times faster than we do words. And then we've got something called dual encoding. It's because there's a picture and your text is embedded in that picture. Dual encoding. So your brain is encoding the narrative, the words that you're saying, and you're associating with a picture. So it's easier for people to recall a message after you've drawn it. So if you want to remember a pitch, if you can draw the pitch as a story, like a little white on your desk, and then all you need to do is redraw that in your mind, and that will control your narrative flow through that conversation. that you as a prompt. So, which is fascinating in itself. But so then I thought, I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start. So one of the workshops that I offer, I ask 3 people to leave the room, and there's almost a dual reality going on here. The 3 people that have left the room, they get excluded for a few minutes, and I say to them, you're going to come in one at a time after each, and you'll only ever see what the person does after you. So you'll come in, I'm going to give you a process, and I'm going to give you a dry erase marker, and I want you to explain that process to the room as if you were in a sales situation. And that's it. You're not going to use anything other than a whiteboard and your narrative. Yeah. So then I go back into the room and I say, right, they're going to come back in a moment. They're going to pitch this thing to you, but they think they're just going to deliver this message to you. But actually, I don't really want you to listen to the message. What I want you to do is actually, one, they will deliver it in a style that they want, and that's they're most comfortable. And it will be very different. Each one will be different. Secondly, they will add a lot more information into this pitch than I've asked them to. They will actually probably draw a mode of transport. They're likely they will draw an aeroplane. I haven't asked them to do that. They probably will draw an aeroplane. They might draw a train. They'll probably draw a suitcase. They probably will add at least 2 other characters in. They'll talk about a meal. None of this has been. I've asked none of them to do this. And they'll probably talk about a restaurant. They may even draw a plate of food as well. And they'll draw a mobile phone and possibly a laptop. This is my guess. I've asked them to do none of that. So these people come back in one at a time, and the first person in, actually the one that stood out is so vividly was the first person came in and they delivered this perfectly, the aeroplane and all this other stuff with a whiteboard, and they used humor to communicate the message. The second person came in and delivered it emotionally. The third person came in and was serious and detailed, but it suited their personality. So the first thing is, right, so now you've seen somebody delivering a presentation where they're not constrained by somebody else's deck. Because as soon as you try to present somebody else's deck, what happens? You suppress their emotions, their enthusiasm, their ability to be charismatic because they're worried about delivering the message that somebody else created. And what are they going to buy? They're going to buy from people. So if you actually suppress their character and they can't express how they want to be expressed, then you've lost something. That's one of the easiest things to do. Secondly, if you notice that each one of those people, they were backed into a corner where they had no prep time, and I gave them a pen and a series of bullet points that I wanted to explain to you, and each of them created a story without being asked. And it's the moment where the audience realizes as what has just happened and that's the breakthrough moment where I think just this is it. It's a lovely moment where people can see it. And this is also when I do the 2 or 3 day enablement sessions, I ensure that the people that are on those sessions experience this. I'm not telling them this is how you do it. They actually see it play out. I'm controlling the attention based on the colors, the size. There's a moment in one of the presentation slides where I actually make something vanish because it looks, how the slide is designed. They will look at the slide, and I will say in 5 seconds, that piece of information will absolutely vanish from sight, and I can make it come back. And it's just based on how well this is designed. That's why whiteboarding works.
Jon, that was an absolute masterclass. Jon, I'm curious, where can people find you and what's next for you? It sounds like there's a lot of things going on. And can you tell people about your book? Can you tell people about if you've got any tools, resources, workshops that they could attend?
Yeah, we've StoryQuadrant.com is the site. We've got a David Brent impersonator actually on the homepage. It's very simple. It's one video on there. You can watch this. It's a positioning story video that we wrote. Somebody else recorded it in the style of David Brent, and he tells you exactly what we do in about 90 seconds. I'm on LinkedIn. You can contact from the site. The book's available. We've got curiosity cards, which these are people get these at events. We've got lots of projects coming up, lots of exciting things. Just had a videographer on a call before. Now we're going to try to do some public examples of pulling people out of their staring at their smartphones and engaging in the real world because they've just seen something unbelievable. So we're working on some of those videos now, really just to show how attention can be captured and controlled. We run open masterclasses as well. We've just run one in London in mid-September. We're going to probably run another open class in January, hopefully, in London. Or we do private events, and we also do story writing. So there's anything story based or presentation based, we can help with that. And I'm easy to find on LinkedIn.
Jon, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed. I love talking about this stuff. So thank you very much for inviting me here today.